Hey, I want to take a second to do a quick follow-up video, a little gunsmith tip here for people out there who watch my videos. And this little gunsmithing tip is a way for me to point out that there's a big difference between actually having experience doing something and just having experience watching videos on doing something, especially if those videos are a little outdated or give you information that isn't really necessarily true. Well, the thing people had a lot of problem with was the fact that I said I often use a screwdriver, just put it right here and just pry my side plate loose. You're not going to bend your side plate doing that. A lot of people are like, oh my God, you're going to bend your side plate, you're going to damage the seams, etc. You're supposed to take a hammer and bash it right here. Well, yeah, that does work. You can bash it with a hammer right here, and after a while it will come loose. It doesn't just pop right off like they show a lot of times in the videos because they've already pre-loosened those. But that does work. But there's a real problem with that, and I'll show you what it is here. That's a little bit of an outdated principle because that works great for revolvers that don't have things like transfer bars and stuff in them. But when you bash on that, look at that. Looky right there. My transfer bar is all fucked up. So I've got to get it put back into the right place. Now, a lot of people may not have even noticed that that was out of place or even known it was out of place by looking at it because they didn't know what it was supposed to look like before they opened the side plate because they were bashing it with a hammer, rattling things around in there. And it's not just that it can happen to. It can happen to other little pieces, but this is usually the number one culprit. Your transfer bar or your firing pin block, etc. That is usually right here. It's that part that rattles when you shake revolvers and people are worried about what that rattle is. When you beat with the hammer, you often put that out of place. And people are talking about, well, you just don't pry it. Even if you won't bend your side plate, you'll actually screw up the seams. No, you won't screw up the seams unless you're actually prying from the seams. You should never do that with a screwdriver. Never definitely pry from the seams. But the thing is, when the damage occurs is when you're actually putting the side plate back. And if something like that is out of place under there, you're not going to get it back on right, and you're going to damage the seams. You're going to end up just screwing up the internals. You're going to just screw up stuff. So that whole bashing the frame thing, it's great, and it will take it off, but it's going to knock things loose inside. And I have found that it's much better, much better to just use a tiny little bit of pressure to pop the plate loose. That way you're not moving things out of place, and then when you put the thing back, just do it properly. Take your time and make sure you put it back in. Put the top in slowly, wiggle the front end around, and then just let it seat itself back down where it goes. And you'll see it'll pop right into place. Right there, it's perfectly back in place. You just got to put the screws back in. Everything's fine to go. You haven't damaged any of your seams. You're not going to damage the seams if you do this properly. You didn't knock anything out of place inside to make it hard to put the plate back on. You're at much greater risk of damaging something by beating it around and knocking parts loose, like I've said multiple times already, than you are just doing it like that. You won't hurt anything. You won't displace anything. And your revolver will like you for it. I've done this 1,000 times at least. Never had a problem. Whereas people that try that banging the thing, I often see them have a problem with the more modern revolvers that have those transfer bars or firing pin blocks in them. Now, another little tip someone did give during the comment section is if you want to know where the screws go back to, just trace your gun on cardboard, take the screws and pop them through the cardboard where they go on the gun. But my answer to that was, or you can just remember where your screws go for like 5 minutes tops. A couple other things I will address also is I always like to use a little push thing in here when I'm doing a video to let people take the hammer back when the gun is open, when the cylinder is open. You can also pull the cylinder release back and do it. I don't find that as easy to do. I like just pushing the button. It's easier for me. Plus, some cylinder releases go forward, some cylinder releases go backward, so I'd have to let people know that in the video, which usually just isn't worth it. And I have a tendency to tear my thumbnail up when I'm trying to do that. So I just use a Q-tip and poke in the little button in there because it's easier and I don't risk tearing up my fingers, and I've always got a Q-tip laying here if I'm cleaning my guns. And one other tip people gave is, you can also just spray the oil in there and then blow it out with an air compressor. Well, believe it or not, sadly, most people don't have air compressors nowadays, so I don't want to make things any more difficult than they have to be. I don't want to give people the impression that they have to have an air compressor to properly clean and lube their guns, so I don't get into that kind of thing. I don't do special tools. I like to do it with just what everybody's going to probably have on hand. That way it makes it simple and people don't get scared and people are more willing to do what they need to do to care for their gun. So there you have it. There's an answer to the people in the comment section that think they know something because they've watched videos, when the reality is Try doing it for a while with a modern gun. You'll find out those little tips you get in videos are often just to make it seem like they know something, or because they have outdated knowledge of firearms. It doesn't really tell you the way you've absolutely got to do it, because sometimes those little tips they'll give you will actually cause you more problems if you're not an expert gunsmith than you would have had just finding the best way to do it for yourself in the first place. Oh, and for the people that also were upset that I misspelled properly in the beginning of that other video, I think I spelled it porpoisely. Well, maybe I was talking about how a porpoise would clean and lube their handgun, but you never know. So that's my little rebuttal to some people that wanted to say some things in the comment section. Just, until you actually do it a lot, I would refrain from commenting based on what you've saw in videos, unless you have found that that's actually the way you should do it.